Okay, so first thing we're going to take a look at is um, what we're going to be doing in Photoshop. This is going to be basically your guys' homework for the weekend. It's not too intense. It's going to be just sitting down and sort of wrapping your heads around the different methods that we use for creating either responsive or fixed layout websites. What I'd like to see from this class this semester is always be thinking about working with responsive layouts. And responsive layouts, the main thing to remember is they don't use fixed numerical values like, our screen is 900 pixels wide, therefore our web page is 890 pixels wide or 880 pixels wide to accommodate for that little sidebar. What we want to do is work with percentage values. So the way our instructional support website is set up, and the best example of this is our homepage, each of these columns uses a percentage value. So out of 100% divided into 5, each one of these occupies a percentage of that 100% width value, which changes as this screen expands. And it has a maximum width. It will only get so big, so it won't expand on into infinity. So as this goes down, the screen size, that 100%, its total size, goes down along with it. Those percentage values shrink along with it. So that means when it gets to a certain point, it's going to resize itself and start to respond to our window size. Now, along with that, this has a secondary style sheet which says when you reach this number, the X, this size wide, switch to using these styling methods, which we're going to talk about as well. So when we get down somewhere around 400 pixels wide, it switches over to this layout, which is built specifically for telephones, mobile devices. And that's because when you load up on a mobile device, you might be on your data network. You really don't want to be loading a whole lot of images. It increases the load time. So when we get down to something like a screen like this, it doesn't load the images by default. It's not meant to. And that's purely for the user experience. You want someone who's on their phone, maybe they've got 2 bars of 3G coverage wherever they are, and they need to get to the information on your website. They'll be able to get to the important stuff without having to wait, maybe another minute for an image to load or for the page to finish queuing itself up. So we're going to talk about that a little bit in this class further on. That's more like it's going to be something probably mid to late semester for us. So what we're going to look at is the methods for setting something like that up, getting our heads wrapped around that. And what you'll see here is on our projects page, we have responsive design and fixed or static design options. So when I click on responsive design, this is an actual web page. And what we're going to be doing is we're going to be mocking this up in Photoshop. You guys are just kind of going to replicate what you see here. So when I resize this, this is what happens. Now this isn't perfect. This doesn't take into account a very small screen size like a phone. So you're going to see this kind of jumps and creates some gaps in there. That's where if we were developing an actual website, we'd go in and troubleshoot this and figure out why is it doing that? What do we need to do to make this work? So what we're going to do for now is replicate this. And you guys can use these pages as an example for what you're going to be creating in Photoshop. So right here we have our fixed layout. This web page is 870 pixels wide. So if we were to make a column, it's going to be 870 pixels wide. If we were going to divide this into 3 columns, we would take that 870, cut it into 3, and we end up with the numerical value width that we need for our 3 columns. And it's the same principle applied for a responsive layout where it resizes. So this one does not resize, it stays the same. We end up with a scroll bar when we get down small enough. Just the opposite of this one, but it uses the same principle. We're telling it it has a very specific width, in this case 100%. And then we're saying, okay, we want 3 columns. How do we get those 3 columns out of that 100%? Now, in that process, we use, with no margin in between them, we use 33.3%. We're losing that 0.1%, but, if you're a visitor coming to a normal website, you're not going to see that little sliver of a difference in width right there. If you really try, you might be able to see it. Maybe if you pop open like a default magnification on the screen or something, you'll notice it, but for the most part, you're not going to see it. So there are some allowances you can make for that. And it's the same deal. If we wanted to take that 1/3 layout and say we needed a 2/3 column and a 1/3 side by side, add those two together. We've got a 66.6% column and a 33.3% column. If we want 2 columns evenly divided, cut the 100 in half, 50-50. So we're dealing with some basic math. Not quite kindergarten math, which I prefer personally, but a little more advanced than that, but it's not too bad. And it gets to the point where you understand how it works and just sort of apply that formula across everything. And this is probably one of the minor hurdles that we'll have, is just wrapping our heads around how this works. So for you guys, for your homework, I want you to recreate these 2 layouts in Photoshop. And I'll show you real quick what I'm expecting of that. So you pop open Photoshop. Hopefully you don't get the spinning beach ball of death like I do every single time. Okay, Photoshop, File, New. Resolution, this is for screen only. So when we're dealing with web resources, we're dealing with screen resolution, 72. All images we put on a website will be 72 in terms of resolution as well, because they're not intended to be printed out. They're intended to be viewed on a screen. And when we work with this, we work with pixel dimensions. So I'm just changing from inches to pixels. And your height, you can deal with that. Give yourself enough room that you can work with it. It's not too important as the width. So I'm just going to go with 700 pixels for the height. And for the overall width of my screen, the largest computer screen that you're going to see today in terms of like minimum size, the resolution is 1024 by 768. So the smallest I design for personally in terms of width is somewhere around 950 pixels. So for this here, I'm just going to go with 950. So that's all you need to do. Set your width, give yourself enough room and height. You can crop it down later, and 72 for the resolution. And I'm going to do my fixed layout right now. So I'm going to call it fixed layout. Going to hit OK. And here we go. So from here, all I'm going to do is I'm going to use basically our shape tools. And this will make things really easy for me. If you want, you can go to View, turn on your rulers, and you can, from the ruler, drag out. Well, let me right-click on the ruler and switch it to pixels. You can grab a guide if you want. Say you want a 25 pixel margin on here. Drag out guides to 25 on either side. So 950, we go to 925. And that's if you were going to give yourself white space on either side of your web page, if you had like a colored like background or an image in the background, which we'll talk about later on too. So what that leaves me with is, all right, we know my total width. Yes?
How do we change it to pixels?
Right click on the ruler. So if you hold down Control on the keyboard and then click on the ruler, it'll let you choose your numerical increments. So now we know I start out with 950 pixels wide, right? So now I've got a 25 pixel margin on either side. So I've lost 50 pixels. So now my workspace for building my site is 900 pixels wide. So what I'm going to do is, what I want from you guys is 4 different column layouts, just like we see here. So I want a full column box, a row with 3 columns, a row with a 1/3 and 2/3 column, and a row with a 1/2 column. So all you're going to do for that, we know that our workspace is 900 pixels. I'm going to choose my rectangle tool down here, and rather than clicking and dragging, I'm just going to click once on the screen. And what that gives me is I can now type in exactly what I'm looking for in terms of the size on this. So I'm just going to give myself a bit of height so I can type something in there. And say this is my 100% width, 900 pixels, right? 900 pixels, type it in. I can check from center if I want to just go from the center of the image. Click OK. And then I can switch to my Move tool and drag it into place. And then from there, cancel that. Grab my text tool, draw a text box, and then just call it what it is. Full width, 900 pixels. Make your type readable. You can make this as pretty as you want to. I'm not too worried about it. We'll get to the design part of stuff later. So there's my full width column. Going on to the next one. If I want my 50-50 columns, I'm going to make one, put it in place, and then I can click and make another one, or I can just copy this one, which is what I'm going to do. I'm just holding Option with the Move tool selected, clicking and dragging. And I might just make these ones different shades of blue. And then I'm just calling them what they are. And then you're just going to go through. Pop open the calculator if you need to. Use the calculator on your phone to get that math right for you. You're going to run into an instance where it doesn't divide into a whole number. Take that fraction of the number and just dump it into your end column. It's not going to be that big of a deal for what we're doing here, or give that decimal place if you want. It's not going to be too big of an issue with what we're doing here. So this is roughly the process you'll go through for the fixed layout. So I'm going to just save this. And here's a time saver for you guys. Once you've done this, either your fixed or responsive first, whichever one you want to tackle first, I'm just going to do File, Save As. Call it responsive. So I've saved a copy with a new name. And then all I'm going to do is come through and do the math on the change in what I'm using here. So I know my full width needs to be 100%. I know that my half column is going to be 50%. So, oops, there's no need to go back through and make a whole new document if you don't want to. I'm not requiring that you guys do that. Save a copy of the completed one, go through, and just figure out what numbers need to be dropped in there for each of those different row layouts that I'm asking of you guys. So this will be your homework for over the weekend. Get those all sorted out and saved, and what we're going to talk about next here is going to be setting up our basic hub page, getting that put online, getting connected, and sort of figuring out how to upload and set things up later on. We'll probably talk about that next week, so that way we'll give you guys some time to work on your layouts in class today.